Welcome to Tom Rhodes Smart Camp. I am joined today by one of the greatest comedy writers ever, Mr. Jesse Joyce.
That's too much. Thanks, man.
You don't
That's
think
very
so?
kind of you. I don't. I think I'm all right at it. I think I'm decent at it. I don't know. Other people say I'm pretty good at it. So
You're killing it. You go from one great show to another. When we met, you were working for the Dave Attell show.
Yeah. Comedy Underground with Dave Attell.
Comedy Underground. Yeah.
I mean, I'd known of you for many years prior to that, but so it was neat that we got to be on TV together. And then also I was helping Dave write his part for all the episodes. Like, because there was always do you remember there was always one really goofy celebrity that would sit in the audience for each show? And I think for ours, it was Ron Jeremy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that for another one, it was Tanya Harding. It was just whatever, just really weird, swing he could take at some random celebrity that was a goofy person from the pop culture. So anyway, so I would help write that kind of shit. And then I got to be on the episode that you were on. So that was fun. So yeah, the last time we were on camera, we were both a lot less gray, I think.
And then you wrote for At Midnight for years.
Yeah. And then I got to work with you on that too.
I used to love doing At Midnight. That show was so fun. And I actually thought you had to write your own stuff. So they would send out the questions, and I remember getting it in the morning or the night before, and it's just writing jokes furiously.
Yeah.
And then you get to At Midnight, and then you would come in and go, oh, here's a ton of jokes that you can.
Yeah, we had the staff. That's what we would do. We would cobble together just sort of 8 to 10 jokes for each category. That if the comedian didn't want to write their own, they could just pick from that list. Or then you got assigned a writer, and so I was with you.
Yeah.
And then we would if you had an idea or you had a thought, then we could cobble together some other thing, and you just have 2 brains on it or whatever. So, but actually, when I texted you, I looked through because I save every one of my texts, and so I saw our text exchange about the At Midnight thing when I texted you about this recently. And I was throwing you, I can't even remember what the topic was, but I was throwing you a bunch of puns or whatever the fuck we needed for that. So I'm sure I could access them pretty easily. Do you remember what you did for that show?
Let's see.
Let me see here. I can get to it.
This is great.
Here, because I was just texting you about parking. So here we go. This is fun.
I loved doing At Midnight. It was such a fun show. I was happy to hear that it's coming back.
Okay. The hashtag was pirate TV shows. For example, Orange is the New Blackbeard. And then you were like, oh, thanks, man. And then I was like, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You get the idea. And then I threw you Somali McBeal. And then there's a speed game called Forgotten Jazz Musicians. So it was Jizzy Gillespie, Count Toothpicks and the Autism Orchestra, Count Meningitis, Billie Holiday and Handsy Gym Teachers. I don't remember, whatever. So we were just kicking shit around. So anyway, that was it's a fun exercise to just that hashtag war thing, where just the pun aspect of it. It was a lot of fun. So, but you always kill me. So you were great on it.
It was such a fun show to do. And I like the game show format with having comedians and that are just coming at you with punchlines.
Yeah. It's a great, I mean, the fact, you know what's nice about it too is that there are no shows where comics can showcase that they're funny without burning through their stand-up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's either stand-up or not, or you do panel where you sit at a, when you get interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel or whatever. But other than that, there's really not an opportunity for you to just do funny shit, but not have to burn this joke you're working on for a special, So that's what I loved about At Midnight. You could just do jokes about shit you don't care about, but just to prove that you're funny, it was a fun, So
how many years were you at Midnight?
Almost the whole time, 5 years it was on the air. So I was there pretty much the whole time. And then the show shut down. And then kind of quickly after that, I was kind of scooped up by Kimmel. And I've been there since then. So
what, you've been there 8 years?
7? Yeah. Okay. Something like that. 7 years. So at Kimmel. Yeah.
And I know we were talking about this before we started recording, but I have to say, Jimmy Kimmel's show is my favorite of all the late night talk shows, because he's the best host. He's the most real. I like the compassionate stances he's made in the past few years, where when he stuck his neck out, it was over something important, his son's illness, and
Yeah, or shootings, like that kind of thing.
Like
yeah, and that's genuine when he.
Yeah. And you can feel that it's not just just some phony dork.
Yeah.
Picking up a check. But the thing I like about the show the most is I think it's the only late night talk show that actually still has glamour. Like the Johnny Carson show, had a lot, like that kind of, Hollywood glamour that you don't see too much anymore. Yeah.
It does feel like, glitzy and show busy in a way, in a good way, but also that you get the sense nobody's it's not fun. Like nobody's trying too hard, like that it all is kind of like the premium on a lot of our jokes are that this has to be rooted in reality. You know what I mean? Like we can't, like nobody's going to, I can't think of an alternative example, but you just kind of like learn very quickly when you work there that like the jokes have to be grounded in something real that people can grab onto because it would be fake.
Interesting. Did you see there's a little firestorm that Hasan Minhaj is getting right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. I did see that.
I just read this article in the Atlantic magazine about how a lot of the things he's fabricated, he's lied about.
Yeah.
Like the story about in his first special where, and I love Hasan. He was on this show before he became massive, but the story where he talks about his prom date dumped him because her parents said she didn't want pictures with her with a brown guy.
Right.
And apparently this article said like somebody fact checked all the shit and that woman who was his prom date said that story isn't true and her family got lots of online abuse through the years for that. And so he's put himself in a lot of positions of to get sympathy. Yeah. Or to make himself more heroic.
Yeah, it's like, it is a weird gray. I know what you mean. And like, feels gross and disingenuous and weird to do. And it seems like he's kind of blurring the line. Like there's obviously like the punchline isn't necessarily the truth. You know what I mean? Like that's, you were telling that story about the heartbreak at the airport and the punchline to your joke. I don't want to step on your joke.
The punchline is not true, but everything else is true.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's what makes it is like that. But the rest of the story, what draws you into it is like, oh, I believe that really happened to you. Yeah. And then if there's a rug pull and you find out like, oh, like you've been married for 11 years and that's not a real story at all. Like, then as an audience, you would feel cheated that it's like, oh, like you kind of, you manipulated my emotions.
Well, and that's what that article was saying about Hasan Minhaj's stories where he's told these stories. And it was saying that there's always been lies and fabrication in comedy, but when it's done to like pull this emotion out of people.
Yeah.
Right. And that it's, that it can cheapen the whole, the whole genre of comedy of not being able to believe. I mean, like, some people, it's bullshit. Like there was a comedian I worked with years ago on the road and every night was his birthday. Every night, it's my birthday, everybody. And everybody goes crazy, but like every night just so he could get this, fake applause from the people.
My favorite fake applause that was this guy that used to do this thing. And it made me so angry, but I stayed in the room to watch it every time because it was so fascinating. Was he would go at the end of the show. And this was also a few years out. It was like in the early 2000s. And he would go, hey, listen, if you guys had fun tonight, I don't want you to come up after the show and thank me. I want you to thank a veteran because they're the reason that we're able to come out here and laugh and have fun. And the terrorists tried to take that away from us.
Yeah.
And they can't. And so I want you to go and hug a vet. And I'm not just talking about this war. I'm talking about every war. I'm talking about World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and the Gulf War. And by the time he got, like, it turned into this, like, everybody was, like, on their feet. Like, he, like, faked this standing ovation for the troops. And I would just sit there in the back and go, like, find me a fucking World War I veteran. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead. Like, where are they to hug? Don't hug them. They're very brittle. Like, you can't hug a World War I man. So anyway, but yeah, like that.
I remember
fake
in the early
applause
2000s,
thing.
it seemed like every comedian was doing a tribute to the troops.
Yeah, but it's fine. Like whatever. If you have a personal story you want to mention, but like this guy literally would just end every set with that. With this like rousing, reminding everyone of every conflict America has ever been involved in and get everybody on their feet. It just was so just cringy and douchey. Anyway.
Well, so what are some of the other most bullshit things you've ever seen in comedy?
Fuck, man. Shit. Now I'm on the spot. I'm trying to think. Do you have a good one? Because I might invoke a story.
Well, like that guy that I'm thinking of, he actually came to England. And I was playing at the Manchester Comedy Store. and they were really strict about guest sets. The guest sets could only come on at the first, because they do the intermission in England. So intermission comes and guy never showed up. And then this guy comes in and he's really arrogant. In England, the MC is the best comedian. He's the one getting paid the most. It's his show. Right. He's doing the most time. And this guy tells the MC says, you can't go on, you missed your spot. And he goes, listen, you're going to put me on and you're going to learn a little bit about comedy tonight. And so before the guy got there, I go, I don't know if it's the same guy, but if it is, he used to do this fake thing or he would say it was his birthday every night. And then he would say, I got to go, everybody. To get them to go, oh, no, don't leave.
Oh, yeah.
And this comedian has since died. I won't say his name. But I was like, it can't be the same guy. But this one guy used to do this. So this guy shows up. He's all arrogant. He belittles the compere, is what they call the MC in England. And then he goes on, and it was exactly the way I described. Hey, it's my birthday, everybody.
That's amazing.
And then he's on like a 5-minute guest set.
Yeah.
And 2 minutes in, he goes, well, listen, I got to go. And they're like, no. So it's all these like manufactured emotions.
I remember I'm glad I had you go first because there was, what I always hate is the guy who will like make fun of his own wardrobe that you have complete control over and you could have not worn this. Yeah. But then you just like, oh, look how ridiculous, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever. And so there was this guy one time I opened for and he came in and he was all like hot and fired up because the airplane had lost his bag. And so he was dressed in just like a LA Clippers, like just, like a jersey, like a tank top, right? And he was just like, look at me, I just look like a fucking goofball and I have to go up dressed like this.
Every night he does
whatever, right. But to me, just to me, he's doing it to me, like tricking me, like, or whatever. And so I was like, oh man, like that's a bummer. Like, and I kind of imagined like, oh, this guy probably like performs in a 3-piece suit. And like, now he's, he's just, these are clothes he wore on the plane. And he goes up there and he talks about how like they fucking lost my, or whatever, right? And then the next night he's wearing, like he comes in and he's wearing a different jersey, like a Lakers jersey this time.
But the same story.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, did they still not find your luggage? And he was like, no, it's like he'd forgotten he even told me that. He's like, no, it's fine. And then he just went up and did the same shit. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, it just feels so like crazy to me. It was like, why are you tricking us? Like, it just felt like it felt betrayed, Like for this just dumb laugh about making fun of what you're wearing. It was just like, don't wear that.
I was like, I got a pretty broad spectrum of what I love in comedy. Mm-hmm. And, there's not too much that like, I cut everybody's slack. If it's a young comedian and, it's such a, evolutionary process and you learn. But one thing I personally dislike is when any comedian, their first joke is, I look like a cross between.
Oh, man.
Like, I think that's like the laziest opening line to go, and my hair, I know makes me look like, a lesbian or I think it's like the most uncreative opening you could do.
There is this fascinating lunatic that did stand up around New York City for a very long time. And he would go up and he would open with, and probably today, if he's still around, is opening with it somewhere tonight. Way after, like this is, in 2017, he would do this joke. And he would go up and go, I know what you guys are thinking. I look like the Unabomber, which he didn't.
It's always,
he didn't look.
It's always, I know what you're thinking. Yeah.
But here's the thing. He looked neither like Ted Kaczynski, nor did he look like the Police sketch with the sunglasses. So in no way did he look like the Unabomber. So he's like this little guy, kind of looked like Steve Buscemi. And so it was like right out of the gate confusing because everybody's like, what? I guess, right? So he would go, I know what you guys are thinking. I look like a Unabomber. And everybody would be like, huh? And then he would go, but that's probably because of this. And then he would lift up his shirt and he had strapped a like a fake bomb, like made out of like toilet paper rolls, like with a clock and like a Wile E. Coyote with like wires and shit, you know? And he would go, that's probably because of this. And then that would just make people uncomfortable. And it was the most puzzling joke I've ever seen in comedy because
like the years right after September 11th, that's when he's doing this?
Yeah, like he would ride the post 9/11, because nobody ever saw him put it on either. So he'd ride the post 9/11 subway system with a fake bomb strapped to his chest. But here's the thing, the Unabomber, what do we know about the only thing you know about the Unabomber, he fucking mailed bombs. He wasn't a suicide bomber. Yeah. Like he never strapped bombs to, so like, that joke, it would be impossible to write a joke that works on like no level. You know what I mean? Like the setup is confusing and the punchline doesn't work. Like it is just start to finish. Every word takes you further away from anything you thought you would understand. Like it just doesn't match up. So yeah, anyway, that's a pretty good one, I think.
That's funny. The Ted Kaczynski Unabomber story is interesting because he had this faulty typewriter.
Yeah.
It was like the S's on it were screwed up or something.
Yeah.
And it was an old family typewriter.
Yeah.
And so his family, someone in his family,
his brother, his brother turned him in. Yeah.
And the proof how they knew it was him was this one faulty key.
Yeah.
On the.
I have a joke about Ted Kaczynski's brother. Actually, it's like the punchline to it, but it's about how the fucking audacity of the greatest generation to call themselves that, like the balls to say, because, like, why are they the greatest? Because you beat the Nazis, great. But also that generation was the Nazis. You know what I mean? Like it's your own fault. You just cleaned up your own mess. And then I point out that Ted Kaczynski's brother is the one who turned him in. We don't call the Kaczynskis the greatest family. You know what I mean? Like they're a pretty shitty family. So anyway, but yeah, so I get to teach people something.
Well, so. I love comedy where you learn something. That's
me too.
My favorite kind of comedy is like I've learned so much in my life through just loving comedy and like historical things.
I think that ties to why you want honesty in comedy too, because if somebody tells you some really interesting thing about the Napoleonic War that you didn't know for the purposes of a joke, and then you're like, oh, that's neat, I didn't know that. And then you find out it's all horseshit. Like that would be very upsetting. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but I agree with you. I love, I've learned a lot from people, from jokes. Yeah. That's where I got most of my information growing up.
Yeah, me too. So. Or if somebody does a joke about one of my historical obsessions, and I'm like, oh, damn, I wish I thought of that. This isn't really related to anything other than the fact that I'm really interested in the fact that you were friends with and or toured with Greg Giraldo.
Oh yeah. No, he was like,
and like, so when he had quit drinking and you had stopped drinking, so were you kind of paired together?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, we had the same manager, and I mean, he was my favorite comic. Like just before he was a big deal, but like, you know, I just like saw him around New York.
So much of his material like is still relevant.
Oh,
like like social commentary things, political things. When I'll see Giraldo clips, I'll be like, damn, that guy was like, he was so sharp.
Yeah. I think about it all the time. Like, yeah, there's plenty of shit that comes up now that it's like, oh man, Greg was doing a joke about this 18 years ago or whatever. But we had the same manager and we both had gotten sober at the same time. And he more or less thought it would maybe keep Greg out of trouble to have an opener who was also sober. And so he put us together and we just became like really close. And he was like an older brother to me. And I toured around with him for years until he relapsed and died of a drug overdose.
I was living in Amsterdam in the early 2000s. You know, I had that late night talk show.
Yeah.
And then I remember he was coming over there. He did some gigs over there.
Oh, okay.
And one of the club managers goes, because I had lived in New York City 98 to 2000 before I moved to Amsterdam. And one of the club managers goes, hey, your friend Greg Giraldo. It's one of those kind of things. He goes, he's supposed to be sober, but...
oh, dear.
Yeah.
I mean, he would have 18 years now because we got sober, like I said, at the same time. So I have been sober for 18 years. But yeah, he really struggled with it. Like, and in a way, like, I am grateful to him for many reasons. He really kind of gave me a career in comedy, you know, because like my just general association with him and the fact that I was his writing partner and stuff, like really kind of...
Well, that kind of helped launch your writing career.
Yeah, bolstered my... And I think your door just knocked. So
the maintenance guy.
You hang on here.
You were telling the story about the stove.
Yeah. Okay. So when I came over, this is weird. Now I have a podcast. This is the first time I've ever had a podcast. Tom's stove was making a weird clicking noise, and we thought that we might die in a gas explosion.
It's a gas stove.
Yeah. So there's now a guy
and you can smell gas.
Has been back and forth doing maintenance. And he's cleaning the stove. So
and we were waiting before we could start recording for it to be fixed. But then, now it's part of the show.
Yeah, it's fine. So we're going to keep going. So
your association with writing with Greg and working with him kind of kickstarted you.
Yeah. But what I was also going to say was that, I learned a ton from it, not just because he was, one of the best guys, in my opinion, the best guy doing stand-up. I just learned from watching him every night. I learned, just how to do the business. I learned how to write, from him, all kinds of things. I also learned how to stay sober by watching him fuck it up a bunch of times.
Okay.
It was it was of equal value to me to learn from him what to do and also what not to do, So, he was easily the biggest influence on my adult life as a man. So
I quit drinking 9.5 years ago. January would be 10 years. Actually, it's
congrats.
Longer.
That's awesome.
And it's kind of like being an athlete. I was really great at drinking when I was younger, and then just stopped being as good at it. And the last couple years I was drinking, 2012, 2013, I looked like shit.
Yeah.
And I blacked out in Philadelphia on January 2nd, 2014.
Okay.
Busted my head open on a tile floor.
Yeah.
Got that scar.
Oh, that's a nice
Fortunately, it's symmetrical.
Yeah.
But so, and then the next day, I in the mirror, I saw so much ugliness.
Yeah.
I had these Frankenstein stitches. I had a black eye, and then I just said, I haven't had a drink since then. So, was there one or more incidents that happened?
Athlete
was there a
analogy
catalyst?
The athlete analogy
is
a good one because I also felt like I was really an all-star drinker. I was really good at it.
Yeah.
But I was like Bo Jackson. I was one of the ones who got injured and taken out right at the height of my drinking. So I series of events had unfolded where I got because I had no immune system because I was just a drunk and I didn't take care of myself. I got double pneumonia and appendicitis and I almost died in the hospital. My appendix almost ruptured because I didn't go to the hospital because I was just like, fuck. Because whatever. I just didn't take care of myself. And while I was in the hospital, I had assumed that it was that my liver was the problem. And they were like, no, your liver's fine, which in my head I took as oh, great. Here this whole time I thought I'd been drinking too much. I guess not. So then when I was healthy enough, 3 weeks later to start going out and doing stand-up again, I immediately just doubled the amount that I drank. And the first gig I did was just in New Jersey. And I drove past, I stopped at a rest stop and there were a couple state troopers in there. And I was like, be cool because there's state troopers in here. So don't be drunk. And they clearly were like, there's a drunk guy. And they just got in their car and followed me and they arrested me. And so I was the first person in my family to go to jail. And so that was enough where I was I almost died in the hospital combined. I still had the surgical scars, you know what I mean? So
when you got the DUI?
When I got the DUI, yeah. So it was a 3-week period of me just being a total mess. So
these might be signs.
Yeah. So, and for whatever it's worth, that guy, the trooper who, because I had the other thing too that had happened is I'd been pulled over for five DUIs previously.
Is it done?
So.
There were two things. There's good news and bad news.
Okay.
Oh, neat. We get to watch Tom get bad news live on a podcast.
So the bad news is that we still have the clicking sound.
Yeah.
But the good news is that I could replace this whole stove with the same one.
Oh, great. So I can still have a gas?
Yes.
Great.
So I have an extra one.
Great.
Yeah. It's not new. It's semi-used.
But it looks like this one?
Yes.
Great.
That's the only one that I keep around, just in case this happens.
Yeah.
Since this one is an older model.
Yeah.
I always just keep a spare one.
Because isn't the building trying to get rid of the gas things or no?
Not the building, but I have read that California is looking into getting rid of gas,
Yeah.
stoves, anything that belongs with gas.
Okay. Yeah, because I love the gas stove. So you can get me another gas stove?
Yeah, I do have one.
Yeah.
We just have to set up a day and time for tomorrow. How does tomorrow?
Tomorrow's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. I'll go ahead and just either give you a call or text.
Okay.
Sometime today later on. I know you guys are a little busy.
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead and set up a day and time and stuff.
Thanks, Ricky. So it's gonna keep making that clicking noise all day?
I can disconnect it if you want me to. Were you gonna use it anytime today?
No, you can turn it off.
Okay, perfect.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, like I said,
yeah.
We'll go ahead
because I don't want to die from the gas.
Oh no, it's fine. All it is, it's just a clicking.
Yeah.
So what it is that it clicks and it has another mechanism that's the igniter.
Yeah.
So once that click sounds and the igniter goes, then obviously we're gonna have combustion.
Yeah.
Which is the gas. So right now at the moment, all it is just the clicking sound. That's all you're gonna be hearing, just the clicking sound.
Yeah, you can turn it off.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, Ricky.
Of course.
And that's awesome. You got another one.
Yeah.
Is it the last one in the building?
What was that?
It's the last one.
That's the only one that I keep.
Great.
I usually just try to keep one.
Yeah.
Just in case little stuff like this happens.
Okay.
Because I know there's other apartments that are being remodeled.
Yeah.
And I usually just try to snag any appliance that I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
So so anything in the future like this comes up, then I'll go ahead and just replace it.
That's awesome. Okay. Thanks, Ricky.
Of course.
Yeah. And, anytime tomorrow is great.
Okay, sounds good. And then sorry.
Yeah.
No, dude. Sorry. Yeah.
No problem at all.
Don't edit any of this out.
No, we're not. It's gonna stay in there.
Where people just get to listen to you.
Yeah. Get a new stove.
Yeah. Right. This is fun.
I mean, it's used, but
it's nice.
Do you prefer gas or electric?
I don't cook. I don't. My I don't mean to sound like a 50s husband, but my wife
like that gas.
My wife likes to cook.
I like that sound of that pilot light, and then when the flame.
Yeah. Boy, that's a real conservative, like a right wing touchstone talking point right now.
Thanks, Ricky. Have a good day, brother.
Hey,
see you tomorrow. It's about
Joe Biden's going to take all our stoves away, right?
Was that a knock at the door?
No, it was the wind bumped it. So there's a lot, unless it's haunted. Maybe that's what fucked up your stove.
So
maybe the ghost of your stove.
So we were talking about you getting sober.
Yeah. So I had gotten pulled over for 5 DUIs previously, and I had gotten out of all 4 of them. So I, just the way you do, like where you're just like, oh, I'm a comedian in town, and they would think that was neat or whatever. Like one cop shook me down, actually, was like, okay, but you can't drive your car home. Call this number and they'll give you a ride home. And then that guy charged me like $200 for the ride home.
Wow.
And I'm sure he split it with the cop in Bloomington, Indiana. Yeah. So, which
he gave the cop 100, he gets 100.
Which I gladly paid because I didn't want to go to jail. So I had just assumed that even when I was getting pulled over, I was like, all right, great, I'll get out of this and be on my way. But this cop was not amused by the fact that I was a comedian, couldn't give a shit. They'd watched me be a drunk. Some
comedian had taken his girlfriend the year before.
Well, I just think that he was just like a no-nonsense cop. And to prove it, I really respected that guy for not just letting me go. You know what I mean? And so as odd and dumb as that sounds, it was the thing that I needed to get me sober. And so it was like, all right, I'm done drinking. And then now to this, every year on my anniversary, I call that guy. He's now a sergeant.
You do? You thank him?
In the New Jersey State Police.
No kidding.
And I call him and thank him for arresting me, which I think they don't get that. That doesn't happen that often. So
that's pretty cool.
But I thought it was important, you know what I mean? Because
it's cool that you know how pivotal and important that moment was in your life.
It was for me, for sure. Yeah, because if he had let me go, I would have kept. Like, great, I just get away with DUIs. You know what I mean?
If I had not busted my head open in Philadelphia, I probably would still be drinking.
Yeah. I think you're one of the rare people. I bet January 2nd is a very unlikely day to get sober.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many people who got sober on January 1st.
Yeah.
But you are like the very rare. If you don't get sober on January 1st, it usually takes like 6 or 7 months. So there's probably a real lull. There's like almost no sober dates.
Yeah.
That are January 2nd, I think. It's probably the least common date.
I was at Helium in Philadelphia for New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And New Year's Eve was on a Wednesday.
Mm.
And then the contract had me staying for Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
But I had January 1st off.
Yeah.
So rarely ever am I in a city with a night off.
Yeah, sure.
So I had January 1st off.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And I went to a working man's bar on Sansom Street in Center City in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And had 10 pints of Sierra Nevada. which was a very normal evening.
Sure, yeah.
I would have 10 pints.
Right.
If I drank wine, I'd have a couple bottles.
Yeah, sure.
I was really good at it.
Yeah.
Until I wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the creator of the universe pushed me off that. Yeah, I feel like that too, in the way that, like, boy, what a gentle, like, the cop was really, they were respectful and nice to me. I hadn't hurt anybody. I hadn't hurt myself. They followed me out of the parking lot and pulled me over. It was like the best way to have gotten arrested. You know what I mean? So I do feel like also, like, it was a very nice way for me to get sober. So yeah, all in all, it was fine. So, but and it's, I've gotten so much more done in life, and I'm sure you have too. I mean, you've fallen in love.
Yeah.
I remember when you were dating your current wife. Your current wife. Your wife. That's hilarious. I don't know why.
You were dating your wife for now?
I don't know why it came out like that.
That's right. So yeah.
But now you've had a couple kids, and I think it's awesome that you've been. I didn't know you were working for Kimmel until yesterday, but I have to ask you. What are your thoughts on this strike?
Boy, it has been a real pain in the ass because I am the sole provider of income for the family. So we have really just like buckled the fuck down. You know what I mean? Like, we aren't going out to dinner. We're not doing any, like, the kids know about the strike. My son, this is adorable. This is the cutest thing. He's 6. So he just lost his first teeth, like both of these teeth.
And no money for that.
No. But what he said in the lead up to him losing his teeth, he said, boy, I hope that these pop out while dad's on strike so that the tooth fairy brings us money. Isn't that sweet? And like, I'm not burdening the children with this. Like, it's not like I constantly like bemoan that we're broke all the time. But they are aware.
He's going to bring it into you and go, Dad, I'm going to help.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, so they're aware that we're on strike because, like, we have to say it sometimes, like, oh yeah, we're not going to go to Disney until after the strike, whatever. Like, there's just stuff we don't do right now. So, but it's not like, but it was super adorable. And then also it's just like, well, motherfucker, I'm the tooth fairy. Like, you're costing me money. Like,
but I just love this.
I hope this doesn't happen.
I love this image that you're painting. I can see your family like grocery shopping. And you go to reach for like Kraft macaroni and cheese, and your son goes, Dad, let's get the generic brand.
I mean, they're surprisingly like pretty cute about it.
Dad,
the kids,
I cut these coupons out.
They're being very understanding, yeah. So for a 4 and a 6-year-old, but here's the deal. So I mean, like, okay, so it's obviously a giant pain in the ass, and all of us would much rather be working for sure. Like, I would rather go back to my job. The one nice thing is, like, I get to do shit like this, which I don't get to do. Like, I can spend an afternoon hanging out with my friend Tom and do a podcast. So that's cool. But I really believe in this cause. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a union guy.
Explain for the people who don't know, like, how important. I mean, this is the first time that the writers union and
SAG,
the actors, have joined together in a strike since what, 1960,
1962? Yeah, the 60s, yeah. I don't know the date.
And Ronald Reagan was the president of SAG back then. And that was over like reruns that were like a new thing at the time.
Yeah, which is fascinating, which like we all, like, it's what keeps writers afloat now, is like residuals from reruns and things like that. Like, that's just part of the job now. That is a protection that was put in place because all of these workers were cool enough to have held out and struck the last time. You know what I mean? So, like, every time that happened, like, I know on the other side of this that it will have been worth it, and it will make lives better for writers and actors in the future. And I think that's very cool. The nice thing about this strike is that, as opposed to like other ones where it is about something kind of hard to understand and inside baseball show businessy bullshit that's like abstract or whatever. This is just straight up there's such an easy to identify bad guy in this. And it's just like 8 billionaires. You know what I mean? Like this is like us kind of fighting against gigantic tech companies, like Apple and Amazon and Netflix and whatever. And like, I feel like everybody, no matter what you do for a living, like kind of can just see on paper that's like, oh yeah, like those guys don't need to be making $50 million a year each, or, like one of the guys makes $220 million a year. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of crazy. And they have slowly chipped away where like, it's harder to make a living now than it was a decade ago for a writer or an actor. And the model of streaming and stuff has done away with residuals and that kind of thing. The protections that were put in place by the guys who struck the last time, you know?
Well, you can sign a contract to write for a streaming show and you get paid once. And they ask you in the contract to sign away your rights to any.
Well, because they're not they are not upfront about how much about viewership.
They don't show their ratings.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have to show their ratings, and so as a result, like they can kind of cry like, "Oh, we don't know so much." And it's like, I fucking guarantee you know how many people watch your thing, you know. But they act like, well, there's no way to figure that out, you know. Just kind of like the last time the writers struck too. It was like about that. It was about cable residuals or whatever. It was about how much to pay people on cable. And you know, they were like, well, how can we possibly know how many people are watching TBS? And it's like, well, it turns out pretty easily. Like you were able to figure that out. And now in hindsight, it's like, oh, what a dumb little fight that was back then.
Yeah.
And that's kind of frustrating to me about this is that I know that's exactly what's going to happen when you take like 8-10 years from now. We're going to look back on this and go like, yeah, what a silly little fight. You know,
they knew the whole time.
Exactly. Like how easily this would be to work out. But you know, it seems like such an impossible impasse right now to like, well, it's just how many we know how many people, like, you know what the popular shows that like Netflix tells you this is in the top 10, you know, like these are the top 10 shows this week. You fucking know what, so you know, so like
they know what their numbers
exactly.
are.
So like, just, you know, like give them and the thing is that residuals might sound like a hard concept for people who aren't in show business to understand. Cause it's like, well, like, you know, other people do a job and they don't keep getting paid after they've done the job. But like, it's not that if the companies weren't making any more money off the TV show, then we wouldn't expect to make any more money off the TV show either. But it's out there, it's on Netflix. They can keep making money off of it in perpetuity forever. So all we're saying is like, well, yeah, just keep cutting us in on that little bit of money that you keep making off of it once it's out there. You know what I mean? So, and that's what residuals are all about too. Even on network stuff, like our show, like Kimmel, you know, it's like, when they rerun the episode on Friday, because we only tape Monday through Thursday, they still get to sell soap in the commercial breaks. So they're making money off that rerun on Friday. So that's why we get a little bit of that, you know? So there's that. And then the other half of this argument is about AI, which is insane that it is now to the point where it's like, well, why don't we just get a robot to write Law and Orders? There's enough Law and Orders out there that a robot, you could just feed all the old episodes of Law and Order into a robot and it can just kick out new things for Ice-T to say. But like the reason that's so fucked up is because all the episodes you fed into the AI were written by people. So it's just stealing them. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, you're just stealing their work to recreate new stuff and cutting the writer out of that process. And so we're saying that there have to be some limits and parameters and protections on when or why you can use AI. And the tech companies have completely balked on that and said like, no, we can just use it however we want, you know? And it's almost scarier for actors too, because like at the end of the day, like, you know, like they're just making movies with dead people now. You know what I mean? They're just putting dead people, like, you know, Carrie Fisher had like a scene in the last Star Wars, whatever. Right. And she had been dead for like 2 years or whatever. So it's like, why would they ever cast some fucking no-name actor when you can just get James Dean to be in movies again? You know what I mean? In the future. So like, you know, and James Dean's great grandkids don't have anything invested in this. They're just like, oh, what? Like, you're just going to give me a check for me to say yes, for you to use my grandpa's face, you know?
Didn't
like,
Bruce
sure.
Willis sign away his like image rights?
I don't know about that, but I know that some people have and some haven't or whatever.
Some kind of neurological disease or something.
Yeah.
But
so that's like the gist of the fight. And I think that's why like I really believe, and I feel like everybody's pretty fired up about it, and everybody is staying the course and being like, you know, agrees that in spite of the fact that this is long and a giant pain in the ass and really difficult for, especially, you know, like for anybody who has like a single income family like me or whatever, but it's worth it for what we're going to save in the future, you know? So,
and the length of time that this strike has lasted, obviously the studios and streaming services are making the statement that they have no problem having AI replace writers.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. They've said, and there's been like leaks from unnamed sources that said that we want this to go till Christmas to,
Break
so
their
that
backs.
the writers lose their homes on Christmas or whatever. Which, like, there was like no better rallying cry for the writers and actors to band together than like, oh, well, fuck them then. Like that really kind of blew up in their face. That's
the sentence that I keep hearing around town when I've heard people talk about it is they want to break the backs of the writers.
Yeah.
By dragging it out. My mother, a very conservative, very religious woman, she was visiting me a couple months ago. And, so hard for someone not in show business to grasp this. And a lot of conservative people are against unions.
Yeah, generally speaking, sure. Yeah, I know that to be the case. So
we were walking by CBS, and my mom, who is curious by nature, one of the picketing writers, she said, "Can I ask you how this affects you?" And the guy like stopped, and it was really great. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "My wife and I, we just had a baby, and I just lost my health insurance, and we're worried right now that if the strike goes on for a few more months, that we're going to have to leave our 2-bedroom apartment and find a cheaper place to live. We don't have health insurance." And then he goes, "And I don't have that much money in the bank." He goes, "Most writers aren't making a fortune." And the guy's like, I don't know who he was. I wish I'd have got his name. But very shortly and very succinctly told my mother how the real effects in his life are really putting a squeeze on him and his, his newborn child and wife. And my mom cried.
Oh, wow.
So it was,
it
was really kind of nice.
No, I'm telling you, like, I feel
I bet he's a good writer.
Yeah. You feel because he
pulled my mom's heartstrings.
Right. He told her some bullshit story about some baby. He's not even married. Like, but that, man, that guy's a good writer. But you do feel the support from like just other, the Teamsters had our backs and everything like that. And, like early on you would see like the Teamsters help us shut down a bunch of productions because they just are in solidarity with us, because they agree with our cause. And, it's not necessarily their fight, but they're just very pro-union. And like, so, when we would like picket in front of, like prevent, like to try to stop productions or whatever, Teamster trucks who were like driving lights or food or whatever on, they wouldn't cross a picket line. So they would just go like, they would like turn to go and then they would see us and then like honk and turn around and like, so like, there's just been a lot of solidarity, like, like the pipe fitters union and whoever else, like they're just like behind us, like these people. So it doesn't feel like a, everything's so polarized now, but it doesn't feel like that with this. It feels like overwhelmingly, like there was some poll that just came out that was like 72% of like average people support the writer's strike, which you can't get 72 people to agree. Like fucking, what I mean? Yeah. Like I think like, it's like, only 60% of people agree that the earth isn't flat. You know what I mean? Like, so like, to get 72 people like or percent to say like, yeah, we support the writers in this strike and the actors, like it kind of seems like, yeah, they're kind of losing the PR battle here, So yeah. So I think that this is a good cause.
Yeah, and I saw on something I read, or maybe even it was on one of the picket signs, it said that what they're really asking for is only like 2% of the profits.
Of the profits, yeah.
And like, they can't give up 2% of the profits?
Oh, yeah, and I saw that something the other day that like Warner Brothers just released their like quarterly figures or whatever, and they've lost $450 million or something so far because of the strike, whereas what we were asking for was like 40 million. You know what I mean? Like, and they've lost 450 as a result of this strike. So but the thing about the tech companies is like that, and I think Phil Rosenthal, him, he writes he's like, he created, I don't know if he's a creator or writer, he, for Everybody Loves Raymond, did a bunch of other shit. And he had this viral clip on TV that he was saying that like the problem with the tech companies is that like, that it's only like a part of their business. You know what I mean? Like Amazon also sells dildos online. You know what I mean? So like it's less important. Like they can hemorrhage money on this front because they're making so much like elsewhere. So it's not like the old system where it was just people who like rose up through show business. You know what I mean? It's like tech people who don't know how this works, but have figured out a way to cut costs, and like that's kind of destroying the business. So that's the general gist of it. So as much as it's a gigantic pain in the ass and I have high hopes that they're negotiating right now that this will work itself out. I know that we will ultimately persevere and that this will be good on the back end for us if we just kind of stay the course and hang on. And it's just a giant pain in the dick for now. But the silver lining is I get to hang out in your apartment, talk to you for a while.
Yeah. So, and then you've been doing stand-up again.
That's also nice. Yeah. So I'm doing Vegas next weekend with the Kimmel writers. We're doing like
at Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club.
Yeah, at Kimmel's Comedy Club. We've been doing a thing called like the Writers of Jimmy Kimmel, where like, and Jimmy is cool enough, like, because he's trying to help us out however he can during the strike. Like, so he'll like tweet out about it when we're going to be there and stuff like that, and try to get more eyes on it, that kind of stuff. And then I have a gig in San Diego on the October 19th at a Mic Drop, and I'm just doing some local shows, and it's nice that I get to I can kind of dust that off again, So.
That's great. So when did you write this book that you just came out with?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I have a book. Which Jimmy was nice enough to plug the book.
Was this something you were working on before the strike, or is this
it's a happy accident. It makes me look like a genius, like as though I got a whole book together.
Yeah, a strike happens
during the strike.
And the guy writes a book.
The timing is great for me, and had you not had, I will allow people to think that I'm fucking brilliant enough that I got a book together, unless they flat out ask me, when did you write this book before the strike? In which case, yes, I started this process. Like a year, or it takes a year or more to write a book. And the book is called Killing the Guys Who Killed the Guy Who Killed Lincoln, a nutty story about Edwin Booth and Boston Corbett. And it's a historical comedy, and it's tonally like drunk history, but from a guy who's been sober for 18 years. And it required a shit ton of research because it's about two guys who lived 140 years ago. So it's not a thing you could just throw together. So I was like, had to read a bunch of old newspapers from the 1880s, and I had to, go and like read a bunch of books and find out, because you can read a Wikipedia page about a bunch of famous people from the 19th century, but if you want to fill a book, you have to do a lot of. So it took me a while to get this together. I did do a lot of it during the strike.
But recorded
the audio book.
Was the Lincoln assassination like one of your historical obsessions before that?
Yeah. I mean, the 19th century is my historical obsession in general.
What are the like, before we get into the book, like, what are some of the things that always pique your interest?
Like, I'm fascinated by the Old West. I think that like the Tombstone and Deadwood and all this, and Dodge City and all those places, that just fascinates. I'm riveted by that. Little Bighorn fascinates me. Like
Battle of Little Bighorn is one of my obsessions. Also,
the inappropriately called Indian Wars, like just that whole period. With like the Apache holdouts and stuff like that in Geronimo, and like that, all that stuff fascinates me. The entire 19th century is super interesting. The gangs of New York era, like during the Civil War, the draft riots, the Civil War itself, like all that, just it's all like, it's so interesting to me because it's so tangible. They seem so much like us, and yet they just behaved so weirdly, and they had such bizarre, antiquated technology and shit that, they still thought it was okay to give cocaine to babies to like rub on their teeth. And, they just like didn't understand how germs worked and how laws were, like it's like sort of like us, but just really fucking goofy. And that's why I think 19th century people are really interesting and funny and fascinating. And so I was always interested in the Lincoln assassination. And I'm always tickled by little weird facts about history. Like you were talking to me before the podcast, we waited for the stove for quite a long time. So we could have done 6 podcasts in the time that we hit
so many home runs in batting practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you were talking about Lord Byron and how I didn't know that he had impregnated his own half sister, and like those like little nuggets about history that people don't know about are my favorite thing in the world. So I had always known that 2 things: that the guy who killed John Wilkes Booth, the guy who assassinated Lincoln, the guy who killed him was a dude who had cut his own balls off with a pair of scissors. And then he moved into a hole in the ground. And I thought that was fascinating.
What?
So I'd known that. The other thing I had known was that
own balls off.
That's a huge part of this book. So we'll get all into that. And the other thing I had already also known was that John Wilkes Booth had a way more famous brother named Edwin. And Edwin once saved Robert Lincoln's life. Abraham Lincoln's son. Saved his life. He was about to get killed by a train.
Right? Yeah.
And he yanked him up and saved his life a year before John killed the president. So Lincoln wrote him a note, like thanking him and the whole thing, and like Ulysses S. Grant wrote. I'm like, thank you for saving, the president's son and all that shit. And then a year later, his own brother fucking kills the president. It's a crazy, so those little two anecdotes I used to kind of just tell just because and then this opportunity came up that this company Scribd, who I know I just spent the last fucking 8 minutes talking about what bad guys Netflix are. Scribd is like Netflix for books, is the best way I can describe it. They're not evil. What they do is it's like a subscription service, and they have a million audiobooks and ebooks and stuff like that. And you subscribe to the service, and then you can just read them all. And they have like just a ton of books, but they also have a ton of originals. They are now they're doing book deals with people to do original books for their service. And so Scribd was looking for something in the comedy history space, of which there is very little. And so they just kind of put the word out. And my manager was like, I know the perfect guy for this. And he was like, just pitch him some comedy history ideas. And so I thought, here's I pitched him a couple, but one of the ones I liked was like, what if I did a thing about two guys that were like on the periphery of the Lincoln assassination, and there are these two goofy guys that I know these two weird stories about. Maybe there's a book there. And I pitched that to them and they bought it. And that's how I ended up with this book deal. And then suddenly it was like, fuck, now I got to research the hell out of this. So anyway, so that's that. So now if you want to get into the details of this, I'm happy to. But
well, I don't know if you know the comedian Jared Logan.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I had him on the show because I heard him talking about this on stage. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Little helicopter passing. The Lincoln assassination.
You did an 11-minute negotiation about your stove. You think that's going to throw the viewer?
Not at all.
Go ahead. So,
the Lincoln assassination is one of his historical obsessions also.
Yeah.
And he told me, and I basically had him on the podcast to talk about this.
About the Lincoln assassination?
Well, just there's one element of it that John Wilkes Booth wasn't a good actor.
Oh, yeah, dude.
And he had this kind of technique where other people would be talking, where he would kind of, I forget how he described it, like he just delivered everything like very loud and grand. So is that what you found also?
Yes, and that's because it's interesting. Their dad, John and Edwin's dad, and there were other Booths who acted too. There's a guy named Junius Jr. Junius Brutus Booth was their dad, and he was a super famous actor. He was like the most famous actor in the world. He was a British guy who came over to America, and he then had kids, and then it was like a second generation of actors, right? So the dynamic between it's kind of like Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas, and Eric. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of the vibe. Is that like that there was this famous actor.
Eric Douglas killed Lincoln?
Kinda, yeah. Well, instead of sadly, Eric Douglas killed himself. But if he hadn't and had killed the president instead, that's essentially what the dynamic is a little bit. So, or just like one of the chubbier Baldwins or one of the dumber Hemsworths. You know what I mean? He was like this hanger-on guy in this famous family of actors, right? And the dad, that was the style in the dad's time. And that was the style forever up to that, was to just bloviate Shakespeare, right? For the common stupid person. You know what I mean? To the point where they would even the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. They would actually mime shooting an arrow. You know what I mean? Like they would pantomime Shakespeare for people. And then Edwin came along and was like young Brando, right? He did this thing that nobody had ever done before, where he was like, I bet that if I just kind of quietly look down, people will get that Hamlet is sad. And I don't need to go, you know what I mean? Which is what the others were doing, And so it was revolutionary. And the way 19th century theater critics wrote about Edwin, it was just a 7,000 word filleting him in the New York Post about what a genius, nobody had ever done what Edwin. And so then John, who was a couple years younger, here's what happened is that Junius took Edwin on the road with him, because Junius was this temperamental celebrity, like a really goofy, unhinged, famous guy who would get publicly drunk and naked and do all kinds of crazy shit. And I think this he would get arrested sometimes because his signature thing was Shakespeare, and his number one role he would do nobody did it better was Richard III, who famously dies in real life and in Act 5 of the Richard III. And he would sometimes decide he didn't want to lose the sword fight and would really fight the shit out of the actual actors on stage. And the cops would have to like pull him off of them, like out into the street. Like he would like just be bashing at them with a toy sword, and the cops would have to come and arrest him for assault or whatever. And then he would get naked sometimes in the middle of a performance and just do crazy shit. He was like an alcoholic and a weird. So Edwin had to go and babysit his dad on the road so that his dad would actually send the money home to the family. And so John was still a younger guy with the family. So John really didn't have too much of a relationship with the dad. Edwin was on the road learning how to become an actor from this guy and also learning what not to do. Kind of like my relationship with Giraldo we were talking about before, right? And so he was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. But he got to the point where he just memorized every Shakespearean play because he was backstage like buckling the hunchback onto his dad and shit like that. And so then his dad dies and Edwin takes over and becomes the most famous actor in America. And John was just like left like with what he thinks he remembers his dad would do. And so he would just go and do that stupid shit. And yeah, he was like an embarrassment. Like even his own family were like, yeah, John doesn't have it. You know, like that was actually written down. Like their sister Asia wrote like, yeah, like John doesn't have what Edwin and dad have, you know, like that kind of thing. Like that was kind of the consensus. Edwin wrote to their brother June, said the same thing. Like, I don't think John's going to fucking tear it up. And but John was really insistent because he was super egotistical, right? And the guy John Ford, the guy who ran Ford's Theater, there was a quote that that John's his egotism borders on insanity, right? That John was like that full of himself. So John would not be reasoned with when they were like, you're going to fuck up our family name if you go around shitting the bed on stage as an actor. So what Edwin did was he was like, I tell you what, because he still insisted. He was like, I'm not going to let you fuck up the family name. Here's what we're going to do. We're drawing a line across America. You can perform everywhere south, and I will do all the cool cities like New York and Boston and Philadelphia and Chicago and Pittsburgh and like, you know, like and so Edwin was performing in like where all the people were, and John got like banished to the South in the 1850s, right before the Civil War. And so the only people he was performing in front of were like angry secessionists, you know, who then would go out with him after shows and bitch about the North, and it kind of radicalized John. So in a way, it's kind of Edwin's fault a little bit, you know? So that's why, because John came from like a super liberal family. And like the dad was like an animal rights activist, like a PETA lunatic back in the 1840s. Like
I didn't know any of this.
I
always thought that he was from a Southern family and that he was.
No, they were all super pro-union.
Wow.
And like anti-slavery and all that stuff. And then John, just because Edwin told him you can't perform anywhere where I am, like moved him to the South. And that's what like got John sympathetic to Southerners and the Southern cause. So, and also he was a dumb guy and very impressionable. So this whole idea that John was a famous actor is like rewritten, like antebellum Confederate rewriting of history. Like these like chubby mint julep swilling Karens of the Daughters of the Confederacy, the ones who like fight to keep Robert E. Lee statues around, you know what I mean? Like they're the ones who started putting the idea forth that John was a good actor. Like not at all. Like Lincoln saw John perform once and was like, man, this guy's kind of garbage. But like Edwin was like his favorite actor. Like he saw Edwin perform Shakespeare like 6 times.
No
Lincoln
kidding.
did. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then he saw John perform. And funnily, that in the way that John would perform, the one time Lincoln saw him, John was playing the bad guy in this play called The Marble Heart, which I have a joke in the book. It was basically like this dude who carved sculptures and then they would all come to life. Right. So I was like, it's kind of like Pinocchio, except when John performed, there were more singing crickets. Right. Because he was shitty. Get it? Anyway, so John would deliver, because he was the bad guy, he would deliver all the bad guy lines like at Lincoln in the booth. Right. So when it'd be like, I'm going to kill him, like he would do that, you know?
Really?
And it was so noticeable that Lincoln's secretary was like, hey, is this fucking actor like keep doing this at you? You know, and Lincoln supposedly quoted like, yeah, he does look pretty sharply at me. Like so Lincoln noticed too, like, man, this guy's fucking like, what is his problem? Like, so yeah. So that's like, so John, the idea that John was a decent actor is like bullshit. Edwin was so famous that after Lincoln was killed by John, the way people talked about it was like, did you hear that Edwin's brother killed the president? You know what I mean? Like, be like if Brad Pitt's brother, whoever the fuck he is, did something. Nobody knows him. You know what I mean?
Like stole the thunder away from his brother and his dad about.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that was bothered Edwin for the rest of his life. He would talk about it but that he knew that like John has like stolen our family name. Like nobody's going to remember any of this shit that we did because of fucking John. So yeah.
And did Edwin fall out of favor? Like people like ticket sales plummet?
Oh yeah. And like fortunately Edwin was famous enough that he got the least of it, but the rest of the family got all rounded up and arrested, and people tried to kill his brother June, who was performing in Cincinnati at the time, and like he was doing some other Shakespeare thing, and like a mob of like 500 people came to his hotel to murder him, and like the hotel staff had to like whisk him out, whatever, and they all got like arrested, spent like months in jail, and Edwin had to quit acting. He wrote a letter to the New York Times that he was quitting acting, which is like a really arrogant thing to do. And then he sat in his house and stewed for like 6 months. And then he was like, enough of this, me quitting acting. He wrote another letter to the New York Times, like, I'm back, everybody. And the fucking insane thing that he did, the first thing he did back was put on Our American Cousin, the play that John killed Lincoln watching.
Wow.
Which is a really ballsy thing to do.
Yeah.
But like everybody was so delighted to have Edwin back that they were like cool with it. But from then on, Edwin mostly played bad guys. I think this is really interesting. I read a book about it that Edwin did really well playing bad guys after that because he looked like John and everybody knew what John looked like. And so when he is like Hamlet and he's like conspiring to kill the king, they're like, holy fuck, like, because everybody knew what John's picture looked like at that point. And it's like the guy with John's face is scheming on stage as Iago or whatever. It was really kind of interesting. So like, yeah, he did, but people whispered behind his back and he knew it was like, you know.
It's interesting. Like so when John Wilkes Booth jumped off the balcony after shooting Lincoln, he like sprained his ankle.
Yeah, no, he broke his leg.
Or broke his leg or whatever. And then when there were some people that helped him get away, but there was a doctor that treated him, and his last name was Mudd.
Yeah.
And because of that, we get the expression, if you do that, your name is Mudd.
Yeah, right.
So like, it's such an important, so many things happened.
Yeah, that like
from that assassination.
Just the ripple effects of that assassination.
And there was a book that I read, I was telling you, I tried to find it on the shelf. I read about the Lincoln assassination, and it's called And Grown Men Were Weeping.
Uh-huh.
And when John Wilkes Booth escaped, I think there was a black man in Northern Virginia, like a worker or something, and he was saying he saw the boat cross the river.
Yeah.
But like people didn't believe this guy until like a week later.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, for whatever reason, if he was black or if he was, worker or whatever, but like they could have found him.
They probably could have found him sooner.
In rural Virginia, like a week sooner, if they'd have listened to this one guy.
Yeah, they eventually did, and that guy told him exactly where to go, and
he knew exactly where he'd gone to.
Yeah. So, so there was like some guys who were helping him, and he sent him to this hotel, and that's where one of the guys was staying, who was helping him, and that guy immediately just ratted on John and said he was back at that farm, and then that's when they showed up, and one of the guys who showed up, it was the 16th Cavalry, is the other subject of this book, who is my favorite 19th century lunatic. He's like my 19th century Mike Lindell, right? He's like so crazy and so delightfully loud and bizarre. And he was a hatter. So he went insane because of hat making, which, you know that, right? That's another thing that we get from that era. The Matt is a hatter, you've heard that? Like that's a real thing. That's a condition that hatters had. They would go fucking crazy.
I didn't know. What, from making hats?
Yeah, because they steamed hats in liquid mercury, right?
Okay.
So you would spend all day in a closed room just breathing in mercury vapor, and it would make you go insane. And interesting little side note I learned about this, I think it's kind of fun, is that prior to that, they used to steam hats in the hatter's piss. That's how they made hats, right? So any picture you see of anybody in like the 1850s, wearing a hat, that had been steamed in the guy who made its piss, right? That's how they made hats. And then they started to notice that the hatters who had syphilis made the best hats. And the reason why is because they treated syphilis with liquid mercury. And so then they made the connection where they're like, oh, we don't need even the hatter's piss. It's the mercury that's doing this. So they started steaming hats in mercury. And so that's when Boston Corbett became a hatter when he was like 18 or whatever. He started making hats. So mercury is like cumulative when it goes in your body. And the more you do it, the crazier you become. And he did it for like 20 years, right? He just made hats. So he just was he thought God talked to him, right? And he lost his job because he just was so manic, and he became like a real Jesus nut. And anytime anybody swore in the shop, he would stop production and like go over and get on his knees and like sing church hymns at them because they had cursed, or whatever. He's a really weird guy. So he gets fired, and then he becomes a street preacher, and he's on the street and he talks to a prostitute, and that makes him really horny, and he gets really upset about it. And he goes back to his apartment and he reads that chapter in Matthew in the Bible about how if your eye offends you, you should cut it out, or if your hand's making you stray from God, you should cut it off. And he's like, he's all horny because of this prostitute. So he grabs a pair of scissors and he cuts off his balls.
Instead of jacking off.
Yeah. Instead of jacking off, he
and getting a little relief.
Reaches in the junk drawer, grabs some dirty scissors and cuts his balls off. And then he didn't even go to the hospital. He just like went to church and then like made dinner and just wandered around town. And then people were like, hey man, your dick is bleeding. You should probably go to the hospital. And so he did. And he almost died in the hospital. And he gets out, and then the war starts. And then he's like, I'm joining the war. And he like becomes a war hero. Like he becomes like a Union super soldier, right? He's like holding off entire battalions of guys by himself after the rest of his battalion gets arrested. Like it's just an interesting, and he gets sent to Andersonville prison. He's one of the only survivors of Andersonville. This guy with no balls. Yeah, exactly. Like one of the heroes of the Civil War was just this ballless dude. And he joined the cavalry, which I think helps if you have no balls to be in the cavalry, right? Because you can probably ride on a horseback for a long time. And so anyway, so then Lincoln gets assassinated, and he like becomes like the first dude to volunteer to fucking chase this motherfucker down who killed John Wilkes Booth, or who killed Lincoln. And they track him for like 12 days to a barn, and they have the barn surrounded, and they set it on fire. And John's going to come out because they set the barn on fire. And then God tells Boston, you should probably kill him. So Boston shoots him in the head. And everybody's like, what the fuck did you just do, right? Because there was a big conspiracy and they needed to have a trial, right? Yeah. And they needed to know. But so Boston gets arrested and they go to take him back to court-martial him in D.C. But when they get there, there's like a Super Bowl parade for Boston Corbett because he is the Lincoln's avenging angel, right? So he's the guy who killed Lincoln. Yeah. And so he becomes like an immediate like American hero celebrity and like huge. Like Matthew Brady, the guy who took all the Civil War photos, makes a baseball card of Boston Corbett basically that gets traded around. Everybody has it, right? Like he's super famous, and he starts going on tour around America doing theater gigs, like retelling the story of how he killed John Wilkes Booth, right? Wow. Like he basically like fills the void where Edwin is no longer on stage because his brother killed John Wilkes Booth, killed the president. This dude is now going around telling the story about how he killed John Wilkes Booth, his brother. So it's really interesting. So anyway, fascinating lunatic. The book's really, it's a real hoot, the book. It's very funny. So, and that's kind of the beginning of the story. There's plenty more happens. It's really interesting.
I would love it. And it's so many fascinating elements, but I mean, the Mercury, the Mad Hatter.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I didn't really know much about that either. But yeah, like, and then he would go back to making hats periodically and just ingest more mercury and get crazier. And like, he'd also suffered from scurvy when he was in Andersonville prison, which is like a war crime, that place. And that also makes you crazy, right? If you suffer from scurvy. So like, he had like double brain damage, you know what I mean? Wow. So then this is kind of in the world of like that we live in now of QAnon and shit. Like, I think this is kind of interesting. After this, like about a decade later, Southern secessionists like started like rewriting the history of like, oh, John was actually not a bad actor and like all that shit. And they then started this conspiracy that John wasn't actually dead, that Boston killed the wrong guy, and that John's still a hero living somewhere and he's not dead. And Boston was so crazy at that point that he started to believe it, right? And he gets a death threat that some troll just sent, like a letter in the mail from John Wilkes Booth saying, I'm coming to get you. And he freaked out and believed it, right? And if you think about the logic, like he knows John Wilkes Booth is coming to kill him because he's mad at him because Boston killed him, right? You see like the fucked up, like mercury poisoned logic of that, right? Yeah. Like, so he just picks up and flees and moves to Kansas and digs a gigantic hole in the ground and lives in the hole with two guns pointed at the opening of the hole for like years. Wow. Like that's. So The guy who killed John Wilkes Booth, that's what ended up happening to him. And he gets put in an asylum and he escapes. And it's a whole fucking wild story. So
wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That sounds great. That's exciting.
It's pretty interesting.
It should be made into a movie.
But that's what everybody who's read the book says that. So yeah, I mean, and I would be interested in doing that.
Was it Scorsese did the Lincoln movie? Who did it?
Oh yeah. I think so. Yeah, the one with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
So the one I really like is The Conspirator.
But nobody was cutting their balls off.
Yeah.
Living in a hole.
Well, that's the problem is everybody whoever does this, like takes it really seriously, like hyper seriously. And that's what I think is fun about this book is it's very irreverent and it's like, like a dark comedy, right?
What are some interesting facts or anything strange about Lincoln that you learned from that?
Oh yeah, I learned one really interesting detail in the book that I talk about in the book briefly is that like a couple things, but the one
it's pretty well known. He had like severe depression. And
His
wife had all these gloves.
Yeah,
she had thousands of pairs of gloves. But please,
and she was really nutty, and like their son had died right before, and in the middle of the war, and like just their house was just miserable, and he was just constantly dealing with like trying to hold the country together, and so then. Finally, the Civil War ends and they get to go as and it's the same week. Like 5 days later, it's like the first thing he gets to do is like go out to this play, and then he gets fucking shot in the head. So it's a crazy. But the crazy thing I learned is that Lincoln, when he was still a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, there was a couple of dudes that he was old war buddies with because he had fought in the Black Hawk Wars, right, which is like part of the Indian Wars, whatever. So Lincoln had briefly been a soldier. And so two of his old war buddies, or one of them at least, was starting this wagon train to like head out west. Because it was like also right around the gold rush and everything, right? And so it was like everybody was like heading out to California. And so they were like, hey man, you should come. And he was like, yeah, dude, that sounds like I would love, that would be, fuck yeah, I'll come, right? He's like, I'm just, whatever, just a fucking lawyer here in Illinois, why not? And like, let's do California. Yeah, let's do it. And he brought it to Mary, who had just had their first baby, Robert, the guy who Edwin eventually saves 20 years later. They had just had baby Robert, and Mary was like, we're not fucking going on a wagon train through the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's like winter's coming up too. That's fucking insane. We're not going on that fucking wagon train.
Donner Party.
That was the Donner Party. Lincoln almost went on the Donner Party.
Wow.
Lincoln would have, so it's like when, and then Mary's like, no, we just had a baby. We're not going. Matter of fact, why don't you fucking run for office while you're here? And then he did, and then he won. And so literally at that same time, while the Donner Party was like, Lincoln had just moved to Washington to be sworn in to start serving the constituents.
That's when the Donner Party happened.
Yeah, well, he was, to serve the constituents of Springfield, Illinois.
They're eating each other.
They are also serving the constituents of Springfield, Illinois to each other with a side of boiled tree bark.
I've been to the Lincoln Tomb.
Yeah.
In Springfield, Illinois.
And, I've been to that too. Yeah.
And interesting that grave robbers almost stole his body.
That's an interesting.
They had dug up.
They were going to hold his body for ransom. Yeah.
Which people did with Charlie Chaplin when he died. Also.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So apparently these people had dug all night. They they almost had extracted and stolen Lincoln's dead corpse. Yeah. And that's why when you go there now, it's this huge underground monument. Covered in cement. They made it like pure cement.
Right.
So his body could never be stolen.
Yeah. So you need like an Ocean's 11 gang to bust in and
like everything. Everything's so fascinating.
That's really, that is a really interesting. I don't know, I know enough that I go down Wikipedia rabbit holes all the time, and that's one of the ones I went down a long time ago. So I kind of know that story, but not that well. But it is fascinating. So
everything. I got to read your book. So it can be found on what's it called?
Scribd, SCRIBD. And if you want, I have a code, right? So if you go try.scribd.com, and by the way, Scribd is spelled SCRIBD. Try.scribd.com/Jesse Joyce, and you get 2 free months to subscribe. So you get a 2 free months trial subscription to test it out, see if you like it. And you can absolutely, for sure, read my little book within 2 months or listen to the audiobook. That's also...
You also made an audiobook?
I read the audiobook too, yeah.
Oh, I want to hear this. This is great.
Yeah, fascinatingly...
So you're telling us that we can read and or listen to the book
basically for free,
and then cancel
the subscription
and never pay a dime.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like
so. Yeah, totally. So, and Scribd is counting on the fact that it's such a voluminous service full of cool things that you'll stick around once you see this 2 months free subscription. But that is absolutely plenty of time to read my book and a few others for free or listen to them. So, yeah.
Jesse Joyce, I love you so much. Thanks, man. You're so smart. You're so funny, and we got so many. It's so easy to talk to you about like every different kind of topic.
Yeah. You're one of those guys. Yeah, like there's a select few people in my life that I know that like we could just come without any kind of agenda, and we'll talk about 100 different things.
And we got so because we both know so many interesting facts.
Everybody, we both know like 3 things about everything, and that's it. If you prodded us on more than 3 things, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But yes, we know a little bit about a lot. So
great, man. Well, I hope I get to see you do stand up before this.
Thanks, man.
The strike ends, and I hope they resolve the strike so your burgeoning family can continue.
So my son can lose teeth and not have to worry about the financial ramifications of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
In closing, do you have any words of advice or any wisdom you'd like to share with the people of the earth?
Here, I don't know. This is just like a piece of advice that I given sometimes, or that I give out sometimes that resonates with people. And it's not going to apply to everyone at all, but it will apply to some people. And the people it does apply to, it might be useful. Is if you think you have a drinking problem, you do, right? Like that. If you've ever wondered, like I wonder if maybe yes, you have a drinking problem, because regular people don't do that, right? And like if you ever asked yourself, like, am I eating too many Pop-Tarts? You have never asked that, right? Because you eat the appropriate amount of Pop-Tarts. No one is addicted to Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
You just eat them or not eat them if they're not around or whatever, who cares? But if you have to constantly put limitations and think like, okay, only on the weekends, or I wonder if, then the answer is you have a drinking problem, and you should probably deal with that. So that's it. That's my advice. I think that's kind of bummer advice, I guess, in a way. But there's hope to it. But
there's been a few times earlier this year where I was around people that were drinking heavily. I was out in bars or doing shows or whatever, and even a few friends of mine who had the most foul breath from just guzzling and guzzling booze. So if you're not going to listen to Jesse's advice and you want to keep drinking, throw down a fucking Tic Tac once in a while.
That's true. Yeah, that would be decent.
Maybe a handful of Tic Tac.
Yeah. So
anyway, Jesse Joyce, I love you, and long may you run, my brother.
Thanks, my friend. It's really nice to be here. Thanks.
Hooray.
Cool. Hell yeah. We did it.
Humanity.
We did it. You got a new stove out of this deal? Everything's working out.